Okay, without taking much of your time, dear members, I would like to introduce my senior and my mentor, my teacher, Dr. Anusha GK. She was my senior at Bangalore Medical College when I was an intern. She taught me the basics of OBG there in BMC, and she finished her MS there. And now, since last 5 years, she's working as an assistant professor in Shivamogga Institute of Medical Sciences in Shivamogga. And when we requested to be the mentor of White Army, she readily agreed, and she's with us today. Thank you, madam, for joining us today and taking this session for us. Can you hear me, madam?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. And now, for the next 1 hour from 6 onwards now, we will be discussing about the benign lesions of the cervix. Am I audible to everybody? Yes?
Yeah, it's clear. It's clear.
Yes,
madam.
yes. Okay, okay. So we'll start from the basics. That is, we'll speak about the anatomy of the cervix, the histology of the cervix, what is transformation zone, and what is the etiopathogenesis of the CA cervix, the precancerous lesions of the cervix, what is it, what is the treatment for it, and the vaccinations for CA cervix. So today in this 1 hour session, we will be covering all this. Okay, and to my whatever possible, I have made it very precise, and whatever is needed, that's what I put in the slides. So let's begin the discussion. Yeah, okay. So you're seeing this. This slide shows the anatomy of the cervix. Now, cervix is a barrel-shaped organ which occupies the lower part of the uterus. And this is mainly made up of smooth muscle cells, the connective tissue, and the glandular tissue. It has an internal os and an external os. This internal os has anatomical os and histological os. Anatomical os wherein the endometrial cavity ends and the endocervical cavity begins, and histological os wherein the ciliated columnar epithelium of the endometrial cavity ends and the columnar epithelium of the endocervical cavity begins. So this approximately is of 0.5 centimeters length, and this is called isthmus. And it has high significance because this part is what becomes a lower segment of the uterus during labor. So sometime when we discuss about labor and all that, we'll know more about isthmus. Okay. Then we all know that cervix has supravaginal part and the portio-vaginalis. Yeah. In a reproductive age group ladies, the cervix, the dimension of the cervix is 3:2:1 centimeters. And depending on the age of the female, the cervix is to the ratio of cervix and the uterus varies. Like in utero, it is the cervix is higher length. That is 6. The ratio is 6:1. Later on at birth, it becomes 2:1. And later on in the reproductive age group, it becomes 1:2. Yeah. Next thing is histology of the cervix. Now, the cervix, the endocervical canal is lined by the columnar epithelium, and the ectocervix is lined by the squamous epithelium. Yeah. Now, this in the next slide you can see this lining, the mucosal lining varies with respect to the age. Now, in pre-puberty, less than say 10 to 13 years age group females, what you can see is the the squamo, there is something called squamo-columnar junction, wherein the squamous epithelium and the columnar epithelium meet. So it is a single point before pre-puberty in this age group. Whereas later on, once she reaches a reproductive age group, what happens is this squamo-columnar junction extends wherein there is continuous division of cells to form what is called as the transformation zone. Okay. Now, what is the difference between this pre-puberty and reproductive age? What is missing in this is, in the pre-puberty age group, the estrogen production is not there. And we all know that only when estrogen is there, then the Dordaline bacilli in the vaginal epithelium will act, and it will convert the glycogen into lactic acid. And this lactic acid is responsible for the lowered pH. And the lowered pH is what is necessary for the metaplasia of the squamous cells. Is it clear? So, because estrogen is not there during this period, so there is no transformation zone as such formed. Whereas from reproductive age group, the transformation zone starts getting formed in response to the lowered pH. So now you can see here, this is the original squamocolumnar junction, wherein the cell starts multiplying and they advance inwards. This is a newer or the advancing squamocolumnar junction. So in between these two is what is transformation zone, which is the area of which can expand from 1 to 10 millimeter. And with respect to all the lesions of, especially the precancerous and cancerous lesions of the cervix, knowing what transformation zone is, what happens there becomes very important. Okay, so this transformation zone is very dynamic. That is, it keeps moving. It is drawn inwards, or the squamocolumnar junction is drawn inwards in the prepubertal age group, and also in the postmenopausal age group, again this is drawn inwards or upwards. Okay, so this is all about the transformation zone. Next thing, see, this is a normal cervix. Say when you put a patient in dorsal position and put in a speculum and visualize, this is how you can see the ectocervix. This whole thing is an ectocervix. This is the external os, and here is the endocervical cavity, which is reddish. Yeah. So, and here this area is the, what is this? The original squamocolumnar junction. Okay, and this is the newer or the advancing squamocolumnar junction, and this whole thing is a transformation zone. Okay, and in this picture you can see these spots here, the white spots are the crypts, the cervical glandular crypts. Sometimes what happens when we are visualizing the cervix, we can find some vesicle-like swellings in this transformation zone here. So what happens, because of infections, maybe the cervical glands get blocked, and this blockade is what results in swelling of these glands, which appear as and are named as Nabothian cysts. Say if there is a swelling here, the glandular swelling here, it is noted that the Nabothian cysts demark the outer boundary of the transformation zone, which is the older squamocolumnar junction. So now, what is this? So this is, this is a normal cervix. See, as all MBBS students who, like, you get passed out, later on you may be posted in PHC, CHC, or somewhere in some hospital. You may be some specialist later, but when some patient walks in, you should be able to identify what a normal cervix is and differentiate it from abnormal cervix, and accordingly refer the patient. So knowing what a normal cervix is, knowing what are the features of a normal cervix are, it's very, very important. Now, a normal cervix, when visualized per speculum, what you can notice is it is round. Okay, it is round. It is pinkish. Okay, it is pinkish. You can't see it. This region is slightly brighter pink. So this region is a transformation zone. This is the external os of the cervix. Okay, so when you're visualizing a normal cervix, you'll find that there is something round structure through the vagina, and then it is pinkish. The color of it is pinkish, and there is external os visualized, and around it is the transformation zone. And you can see that this appears, the surface of it appears regular. This is one more characteristic feature. And when you just palpate or touch the cervix with any instrument, then it doesn't bleed on touch. If it bleeds on touch, then it is not a normal cervix. Okay, and consistency of it, it is almost like when you feel your nose, how this is to say, when you say structures are firm, you say the consistency is like that of the nose, right? So it is almost firm. Whereas during pregnancy, what happens? It becomes soft, right? That is what is Goodell sign. Yeah. So next slide shows an abnormal cervix. See, compared to the previous one, you can find that, you know, the external os is not so well made out. There's some discharge coming out. The surface of the cervix is irregular and it is somewhat reddish in color. Okay, so you need to differentiate normal and abnormal cervix. Okay, that is what is done in downstaging of cervix. Now, WHO has come up with this experimental approach, wherein you know, especially these nursing staff or any paramedical staff in various like PHCs, they are given a training for 2 to 3 weeks, wherein they are exposed to visualizing different cervix of different women, and they are trained to pick up what is normal. Yeah, what is normal they should pick up, and also what is abnormal they should pick up. So anything normal, they can ask them to go home. Yes, and anything abnormal, they need to refer such a case to higher center. See, in a country like ours, where there's so much of population, and even though the screening modalities like pap smear and all those things are there, but doing it is so not feasible, right? So downstaging of cervix is an important thing, wherein you just, based on the visualization of the cervix, we decide whether this is normal or abnormal, and accordingly refer the case. Now, we'll move on to various lesions of the cervix, which are benign. So first is the cervical erosion, also called as cervical ectopy. Next is cervical ectropion, cervical tear, cervical hypertrophy, and then the precancerous lesions of the cervix. Today, we'll be dealing with all these things. So what is a cervical erosion or ectopy? Now, you've all heard of the soil erosion, right? So wherein the upper layer of the soil gets eroded or denuded, right? So the same thing happens to the cervix. Now, around the external os of the cervix, that is in the transformation zone, what is it lined by? The transformation zone is lined by the squamous cells, correct? So now when these squamous cells are replaced by columnar cells, that is when it is called erosion. Okay. Now, when can it happen? What are the risk factors for cervical erosion? It can happen physiologically during pregnancy. Okay, owing to the high estrogen status. So, during pregnancy, it can physiologically be there, and also in pill users, those who are using the OC pills, also cervical erosion is common. And pathologically, cervical erosion can happen wherein there is cervical infections, and commonest infections being the Trichomonas vaginalis or Candida, bacterial vaginosis. So during this infection, we can have cervical erosion. So what here you can see? So here you can see that around the external os of the cervix, there is slightly bright pinkish area, right? Now, See, unlike the slide which you saw here, are you seeing a brightish, so such a bright pinkish area? What you're seeing in this? No, right? So now this could be the differential diagnosis of such a feature could be again cervical erosion, or it could be a pre-malignant condition, right? So any pre-malignant condition of the cervix can also appear like this. Okay, what is a treatment wherein say such a case, I take a biopsy, I send, and it comes negative for any CIN, then I conclude it as erosion. So then what is a treatment for erosion? I can do either what is called as cryotherapy, okay, or I can go in for laser therapy. We'll discuss about all these treatment modalities later. Okay, so cervical erosion can be treated with cryotherapy or laser therapy. And the underlying cause being infection, we can also treat it with antimicrobials. So the next entity is the cervical ectropion. So what is this? You've all in ophthalmology also you had the ectropion of the eyes. The eyelids are everted. The same thing happens in the cervical ectropion, wherein the lips of the cervix are everted. Okay. Very commonly, what happens when we are doing a per speculum examination, when we use an anterior vaginal wall retractor to retract, to visualize the cervix, sometimes we may hold it very tight, which can result in this eversion of the upper lip of the cervix. That is one thing. Other thing is, during pregnancy, ectropion is quite common. Okay, and if you leave it untreated, it can result in infections. So we do start antimicrobials in such a case. Then next thing is a cervical tear. I've seen in your question bank, cervical tear is a commonly asked either a short note or a short answer. So cervical tear, what is it? That is in various sides of the cervix, the lips of the cervix, in and around the cervix, there could be tear. And when all can it happen? It can happen or usually it happens during labor. Okay, during labor, especially difficult labor, when you're delivering a very big baby, or when you have used instruments to deliver the baby like forceps or ventures. Such cases there could be cervical tear. Okay, and also cervical tear can happen in other invasive procedures which we do. For example, for abortion we are doing MVA, manual vacuum aspiration. We are doing DNC or dilatation and evacuation, or for molar pregnancy we are doing suction evacuation. That time what we do, we hold the lip of the cervix with a speculum, with a speculum, so that we stabilize the cervix during all the procedures, right? So when during this, even the cervix can get injured. That's why it is said that the gravid uterus, you should be very careful. You need to use a sponge holder rather than anything like Alice or Valsalem or anything which has those tongs which can injure the cervix, which can result in cervical tear. Okay, so depending on what the depth of the tear is or how much of bleeding is happening, we can treat it accordingly. Now, many times during labor, if you see, there could be cervical tear, but it is not bleeding from those edges. So you don't have to do anything if there is no bleeding. You just have to watch such a patient. Whereas if it is bleeding, then certain few hemostatic sutures can be applied. Okay, and next thing is you can also pack the vagina. So compression can also result in stoppage of bleeding. And also we can use copper sulfate or Monsil solution to stop the bleeding. So this is about cervical tear. Next thing is cervical hypertrophy. Now in the first slide, we got to know that the dimension of the cervix, normal cervix in reproductive age is around 3 by 2 by 1 centimeter. Now anything which results in change in the dimension or excessive increase in dimension as cervical hypertrophy. Okay, this cervical hypertrophy can happen because of carcinomas, especially the endocervical carcinomas, or also because of prolapsed uterus. So whenever there is prolapse of the uterus, there is so much of congestion, right? There is reactive fibrosis. So it results in cervical hypertrophy. So cervical hypertrophy, you find out the cause and accordingly treat it. So these are few of the benign lesions. Now we'll move on to very important thing, which is precancerous lesions of the cervix. This precancerous lesions of the cervix are the forerunners of the carcinoma cervix. See, till almost 1950s, we knew about carcinoma in situ, carcinoma cervix, but we did not know much about the precancerous lesions of the cervix. Okay, it was only in 1960 that somebody called Richard found out that there is an entity called dysplasia, and he also coined the term CIN, cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. Okay, now CIN can happen in age group less than 35 years, and carcinoma cervix, the occurrence age wise is bimodal. So the epidemiological study says that its occurrence is bimodal. That is, once it can happen around 35 years of age group, 35 to 40 years of age group. And also the second peak can happen around 55 to 60 years of age group. Okay. And CA cervix is most common genital cancer in India and the second most cause of death due to cancer in India. Okay. Now, why it is so important? Why have we scheduled one single class for this precancerous lesion? Or there's so much of so much of studies being done on precancerous lesions of cervix is that this whole cervical cancer is a preventable disease because of the precancerous lesions. Because these precancerous lesions have they stay for a longer period, and we can also screen and detect them, and also there is a treatment for this pre-invasive state. So that's why cervical cancer is termed as a preventable cancer. Okay. Now we'll discuss about etiopathogenesis of precancerous lesions of cervix and carcinoma cervix. 99.7% of these lesions is mainly due to human papilloma virus. And other causes, other etiological factors, it is said that even the seminal fluid, the histones in the seminal fluid, and even the herpes simplex virus can also be an etiological factor. This but most of the cases, in 99.7% of the cases, it is human papilloma virus which is a causative factor. Now, this HPV virus is a DNA virus. Okay, it exists in various serotypes. Around study says that they've already detected around 120 serotypes of HPV. And among all these 120 serotypes, they have grouped few of the serotypes which are high risk and few which are low risk. Now, most important ones among the high risk are HPV 16 and 18, which result in CA cervix, whereas HPV 6 and 11 result in anogenital warts. Okay. Now, what does this HPV virus do? Now, if you see, women are prone for HPV virus infection. Why? Especially those at high risk. We'll come to those risk factors for this HPV infection in the next slide. So now what happens? This HPV infection, HPV virus gets into the cells, the the cells which are undergoing so much of high metaplasia within the transformation zone. So it infects the metaplastic cells in the transformation zone, and most of this infection regresses spontaneously without any treatment. 80% of this infection regresses on its own. Okay, only those with high risk factors, in such cases, then HPV infection continues and results in malignancy. So what does this virus do? It gets into the host transformation zone squamous cells, and then its DNA gets incorporated into the host cell DNA, and then there is transcription, translation, resulting in this E6, E7 oncoproteins, which will hinder the P53, which is a tumor necrosis factor. So thus, there is these cells, there is no check on the division of these cells, and thus they keep dividing and dividing profoundly and result in malignancy. Okay, so what are the risk factors for HPV infection? Who are at risk? Very early exposure to coitus, very early marriage, then multiple sexual partners, which results in exposure to different serotypes of HPV. Then it can be even the high-risk males, exposure to high-risk men, and abnormal sexual behavior in the females, and exposure to the viruses which are of high virulence like HPV 16 and 18. Also, higher parity, the OC pills usage, smoking, then reduced or low socioeconomic status, nutritious deficiency, then coexisting immunocompromised status, that is infection with STDs like HIV. See, very important thing is that the micro trauma which happens at the level of the transformation zone, which results in entry of these viruses into the cells. Okay, so now if she is again and again she becomes pregnant, so higher parity is a high risk, and then early age of exposure to sex, and especially it is said that during menstruation or immediately after menstruation, if they're exposed to sex, then also there is higher chance of this infection. Now in this slide you can see that, you know, metaplasia is a physiological thing which is happening at the transformation zone, which we all know by now, that you know, reproductive age group ladies, there is a Doddeline bacilli exposed to, under exposure to estrogen, what it will do, it will produce lactic acid. So this lactic acid will trigger the cells in the transformation zone to keep multiplying, but that multiplication is orderly, though at a very higher rate it is orderly. That is when it is called metaplasia. Whereas if this division becomes disorganized, then it is called dysplasia. So dysregulated, disorganized cell division, which results in the formation of cells which are pyknotic. Okay, especially there is a perinuclear halo around these infected cells with HPV. Okay, and also the nuclear and the cytoplasmic ratio will increase, and there is hyperchromatin within the nucleus. There is abnormal number of chromosomes owing to the like, you know, the DNA of this HPV gets incorporated, so the abnormal number of chromosomes is also noted. So this all happens, this is all seen in dysplasia. Now if this dysplasia okay, now if this dysplasia happens in the, if this dysplasia is restricted only to the lower 1/3 of the region of the epithelium, then it is called CIN1. Okay, now if this dysplasia extends to above 1/3 of this epithelium and is well within the 2/3 of the thickness of the epithelium, it is called CIN2. Okay, and third is if it extends beyond 2/3 of the thickness of the epithelium, then it is called CIN3. Okay, now if the whole thickness of the epithelium is involved, then it is called carcinoma in situ. You can see in this slide. Yeah, so so this is a normal epithelium of the cervix. Okay, now LSIL is synonym to CIN1. Okay, LSIL is synonym to CIN1. HSIL, in this we have grouped all the three things: CIN2, 3 and CIS, that is carcinoma in situ. All these three things come under HSIL. Okay, now further, if this dysplasia extends and also there is invasion into the stroma, underlying stroma, then it becomes carcinoma cervix. Now, carcinoma cervix, again, depending on the depth of invasion, whether it is less than 3 mm, more than 3 mm, further extends beyond cervix, other organs, depending on that, the staging of cervix CA cervix is done. Okay. Now, CA cervix is a clinical staging. We examine the patient and we stage the CA cervix, whereas ovarian carcinoma is a, like, you are operating and then you look at the spread and all that, and then you stage the ovarian carcinoma. Okay, so clinical staging is what is done in CA cervix. Next thing, now we have this precancerous lesions are various names are given depending on various classification systems on those cytological reports. Okay, now we have Bethesda, we have cervical intraepithelial neoplasia classification, dysplasia classification, which is WHO classification. We have Papanicolaou classification. Okay, now in this, most acceptable is the CIN classification. Okay, sorry. Okay, now Bethesda classification is not universally accepted, but many a times our reports may come as LSIL. So we must know what LSIL means. Okay, so NL is with normal limit. So on PAP, if it is graded as 1, it means that in other systems it is within normal limit. Okay, so second grading is wherein we find it as an inflammatory smear. See, tomorrow, say later on in future, so many of you may become pathologists. So it's very important for you to be very sure of the reporting. Along with that, if you detect something like inflammatory smear, you need to detect what are the infectious agents which is resulting in this inflammatory smear, and it is possible. That's what the classification says. Okay, then we have ASCUS, which is abnormal squamous cell of undetermined significance, which means that the squamous cells are in such a way that they are atypical. Okay, so that is ASCUS. Then we have LSIL, low grade squamous intraepithelial lesion, which also means CIN1, which means mild dysplasia. You saw the previous picture wherein only 1/3 of the epithelium is involved. That is mild dysplasia. Okay. Next thing is HSIL, high grade squamous intraepithelial lesion. Now in this we have CIN2, 3, and this has to be CIS, which is carcinoma in situ. So all these three together is HSIL. Now all these three are together grouped because the management is almost similar. The management varies with this entity, whereas with this it is almost similar. So it is HSIL altogether. Wherein here we have moderate to severe dysplasia or carcinoma in situ. Then the fifth grading is a squamous cell carcinoma. So this classification system is important. Next thing. Now, we already know that precancerous lesions have a longer period when it has like longer period of it to become CA cervix. That is, if from normalcy to become LSIL, LSIL and LSIL to HSIL and to cancer, it can take a time period of about 10 to 15 years. Okay. Next thing is cervical cancer screen. So we have many screening modalities, and the most common and usually asked thing is, okay, so the most commonly used screening method is the pap smear. Okay, so we'll know more about it. So what is this? How do we do it? What are the prerequisites? How do we read a report of pap smear? All this we'll know. So what you're seeing here is a Ayer spatula. Okay, it can be plastic, made out of plastic or wooden. Okay, it is said that if you use wooden ones, and more chance that the cells get stuck to it. So plastic is much better. So, and then this, what you're seeing down is a cyto brush. Okay, now pap smear, before taking pap smear, you need to check into the prerequisites. That is, when you examine a patient and you find that there is bleeding from the cervix, from the external os of the cervix, then there is no point in doing pap smear, because the smear will be totally filled with blood cells, right? So making sure that we are not taking pap smear during her menstruation. So it is said that from 10th day of the cycle to 22nd day is what we need to take the pap smear. And she should make sure that she has abstained from coitus for the past 24 to 48 hours. Next thing is, she should have not used any spermicidal jellies or some estrogen creams or some progesterone capsules. Okay. So she should have not used, or she should have not used tampons, okay, which can give a report of, most often it will be inflammatory smear, right? So she should have not used all these things. During menstruation, you should not be doing pap smear. So now, how do we do a pap smear? See, this is done on a OPD basis, right? Patient is put in dorsal position, then a self-retaining cuspo speculum or a sim speculum can be placed, and then you visualize the cervix. First, you look for the cervix and make out the external os. When you see the external os, only then you are sure that, okay, this is cervix. If not, what happens? The bulge anteriorly or posteriorly, which could be the bladder or the rectum, you may, think it to be a part of the cervix and take a smear from there. So visualizing the cervix properly and seeing the external os. If it is difficult to visualize, what you have to do, you have to ask her to put her legs, or you have to ask her to be in lithotomy position. Okay, then it is easy to visualize the cervix. Then what we do, first we take the ectocervical specimen. We use this Ayer spatula. You can see this end which is longer, right? So this end which is longer is placed at the ectocervix, or the external os of the cervix, and then you rotate it 360 degrees. Okay, then immediately what you do, you smear it on a slide and fix it using alcohol based fixative. Okay, and then after this you take the specimen from the endocervix using a cyto brush. Okay, you pass it through the external os into the endocervical cavity, and then again rotate it 360 degrees. Okay, then again you smear it and fix it. See, it is also important to fix the slide. It is said that within the next 30 seconds or so, you need to fix the slide. If not, it is very easy that these cells get dried up and we can't report it properly. And very important thing is the skill to take the pap smear rightly. Okay, many false negative reports may come based on this, based on the method how we do it. Next thing is, I just read through, and pap smear, we just think that, okay, I send the smear to the pathologist and all he has to do is see through the slide. No, before that, the slide has to go through series of procedures. You need to wash it under tap water, then again put an alcohol, put it into an alcohol based solution, then again wash it, then again use hematoxylin, and after that again there are 14 steps before we read it under a microscope. Okay, so it is very important that even we have the technical support, the technicians who are doing this. Okay, the next thing is reading the report. We got to know, we just this slide here, this is how the reports are given. Either it is given as normal or inflammatory smear or dysplasia, CIN 1, 2, 3, CIS or squamous cell carcinoma. Sometimes you may even get a report saying that the smear is unsatisfactory. It means that the pathologist has not found the adequate number of cells. At least it is said that there has to be 18,000 to 20,000 cells in that slide which we make. So if we don't take a smear properly, then it comes as unsatisfactory smear. Okay. When do you do the screen? When do you start doing pap smear? So after 3 years of exposure to coitus, whatever early age of coitus it is, 3 years of exposure to coitus, or it is fixed as 20 years. 20 years you should start screening the female after she is exposed to coitus. Okay, I have had few of them saying, I mean, they have put a patient on the cot in the OPD, and thankfully one of the staff went there, and we got to know that she is unmarried and hymen intact, and we were few of them, I mean, few students were about to do pap smear for such a person. So pap smear should not be done if she is not exposed to coitus. Okay, so it should be started 3 years after exposure to coitus or from the age of 20 years. Okay, before 20 years, no screening is needed. So from about 20 years, what we do, we do pap smear every 3 years once. Okay, if it comes negative, again 3 years later, again 3 years later. This is how we need to do. Till how many years? Till 29 years. After that, what we do, again we continue doing it. Again we continue doing pap smear every 3 years. Okay, but we have something added on to it. We can also add HPV co-testing to this pap smear. So when we do HPV co-testing with pap smear, then we can repeat this screening every 5 years. Is it clear? So if we are just doing pap smear, we should keep doing pap smear every 3 years once. Till when? 65 years. So no doubt, we should start from 21 years and keep doing pap smear till 65 years, every 3 years once. Every time when it is negative. Okay. Now, if we are doing HPV testing, then we need to do the pap smear with HPV testing every 5 years once. Okay, and HPV testing need not be done before 30 years. Why? Because very high chance that you will find HPV there. Okay, metaplasia and all, it's very common at this age group. That's why we don't do HPV testing in this 21 to 29 years. Okay, now during this period till 65 years, say she underwent hysterectomy. So if the hysterectomy has been done for a benign cause, for example, it was a fibroid or it was abnormal uterine, it was a DUB case. So you have done hysterectomy for a benign cause. Then you don't have to do pap smear after that. Whereas if it is done for anything like this, a pre-malignant condition or anything of CA type, anything, then you need to keep doing pap smear till two negative results are obtained. Okay, when previously, say 6 years back, she has got the first test, and again we do it after 3 years once again. So these 2 tests are negative, then you can stop pap smear. Is it clear? Now, say you may be wondering, okay, she's hysterectomized, then why are we doing pap smear? How are we taking pap smear? We should be taking smear from the vaginal cuff or the vault. Okay, because we'll know later on sometime, we'll also discuss about vaginal intraepithelial neoplasia and vaginal carcinoma and all. There also etiological factor is HPV. So this can spread to the vagina as well, even though hysterectomy. That's why we need to take pap smear from the vaginal cuff. Is it clear? Okay. So next thing, what is this LBC? And this is liquid based cytology. It's a newer improvement on the pap smear. Now what is done in this? We take the smear just like what we just discussed before with the IUR spatula and the cyto brush. Only difference is we put it into this box. What you're seeing now, the box. This box has a liquid which is a preservator. Okay, which will preserve all the cells. And after that, it is passed through a filter, which will filter the cells. Especially these blood cells are filtered away, so the yield of the cells is much higher. So the reporting is much better with LBC. Okay, so the same thing. After that, how it is done, it's put on a slide and then it is read through a microscope, and that based on that system, everything is the same. Only thing is a technique of collecting the cells, where the yield of the cells is higher. Okay. Next thing is a colposcope. See, what is this colposcope? It is also a microscope, but unlike the usual microscope, this magnification is much higher, about 10 to 20 times higher. Okay. And colposcopic examination can be done in OPD, a daycare procedure. Okay. While doing this, you need not even use a local anesthesia or even sedatives. Okay. What you need to do, you put her in lithotomy position, use the Cusco's or the sim speculum. You need to visualize the cervix with the transformation zone completely. Only then then you can do colposcopic examination. You need to visualize. If you are not able to find out this the os and the transformation zone, then you can't. Your colposcopic examination may not be completely reliable. Okay, so that is when you need to go for the next screening method. Okay, so before you do colposcopy, what you should do, you need to put her on lithotomy position and then use all the instruments. And then if there is any discharge from the cervix, you need to wipe out with the gauze piece. Then you will visualize it. Okay, on colposcopic examination, how will it appear? See, what this is a normal cervix. It appears like this. Okay, again, external os, transformation zone, and the color and all, the contour, the surface, all this. Okay, now what you can see in this is, abnormal vascularization of the cervix. Okay, which is a feature of carcinoma cervix. Okay, when you are seeing through the microscope or seeing through this colposcope, you will notice the os, the transformation zone, any growth there. Okay, then also we use something called a green filter, where you will notice the vascularization around this transformation zone and the cervix. Okay, sometimes it can be punctate, or what you are seeing now, this mosaic pattern, wherein there is capillaries are there around certain group of cells. These all features suggest CA, carcinoma. Okay, and also you can see here there is here we have also added on one more screening method along with colposcope, which is VIA, visual inspection with acetic acid. Okay, so now what are the indications for colposcope? When should you do colposcope? When should you do colposcopy? Now you have done a pap smear and the pap smear has come positive. It says something like CIN1, 2, 3, or it comes as some lesion is there. Then you want to reconfirm it. That's when you do colposcopy. Okay, so you do a colposcopy, and then sometimes you may take a colposcopic guided biopsy also from there. Okay, next thing, now pap smear says there is nothing, it is negative. But when I see it visually, I'm naked eye observation shows that it bleeds on touch, there is some lesion, then what we should do? We should do colposcopy. Is it clear? So in these two conditions, you can do colposcopy. Okay. Now, next. And also colposcopy, like as I already mentioned, for this visual inspection with acetic acid and Lugol's iodine can also be done under the guidance of colposcopy. Next thing. Next screening modality is the visual inspection with acetic acid. Now you are seeing in these two pictures, both are abnormal cervix. So this is also the whitish area, and this is also the whitish area around the external os. Okay. Now what is this? How is it done? See, what is available in the market, the acetic acid is 100% acetic acid. If we put that 100% acetic acid directly on the cervix, then it will get charred. So what is said, it has to be diluted, and what is to be used in this VIA is a concentration of just 3 to 5%. That's it. Okay. So you can just use a Cusco speculum or Cusco speculum, and by naked eye visualization you can do this, or you can also use a colposcope. Okay. So you will apply this 3 to 5% acetic acid solution, and you will watch that area around, in and around the transformation zone, what is happening. So now if it is a normal cervix, what happens? There won't be any abnormality, no whitish formation. Whereas if it is precancerous or cancerous lesion, then this precipitate is formed. What is this? What is the principle behind VIA? Now, acetic acid will react with the proteins and will coagulate and form this white precipitate. Acetic acid with the proteins will cause this precipitate. Now, where are these proteins? Now, if you see the cells, the dysregulated and highly dividing cells of neoplasia will definitely have high nucleic acids, correct, which are again proteins, correct. So high protein content in all these things will take up the acetic acid and cause this precipitate. Is it clear? Now, depending on how fast, say I've applied now this acetic acid, and how fast that white precipitate comes, how thick is it, does it touch the outer layer of the squamocolumnar junction? Based on this, we again grade it. It could be, see, if it appears, it takes some time, few seconds, say 6 seconds, 10 seconds, and aramak barutte a white precipitate, and it is not touching the outer border, and it is not so thick, then it is called CIN1. Okay, so this is CIN1, and this is CIN3, or probably even CIS. Okay, so let us not go so much into it. So know that this is VIA. Next thing is VILI, VILI. What is this? Visual inspection with Lugol's iodine. See, we as students, avaga, say 8th standard, 9th standard, that time we all might have done this experiment wherein a potato was given and you apply the Lugol's iodine and it gives that brown color because of the starch content, right? This is the same principle here. This normal squamous cells, okay, normal squamous cells will have glycogen, and when you put in the Lugol's iodine, it becomes brown. Okay, whereas these abnormal cells, these dysplastic cells which are dividing so much, so at such high rate, do not have glycogen, so they do not take iodine and will give this mustard color. Okay, so this see, if this was not there and it was totally this brown color cervix, then it was normal. Now because there is this saffron colored area, it shows that this is not normal. So this is VIA and VILI. Now it is said that again in our country, especially compared to PAP test, which is so laborious, we just discussed that there needs to be a technician. He has to read this. Then there has to be a person, a pathologist, to again read it, and then he has to give a report. It has to be brought to the gynecologist. That person has to read. So this pap smear is very cumbersome. Yes, right? It involves a lot of expenditure as well. Though the screening is free and all that, the government bears all the expenses, correct? So now, whereas compared to this, VIA, Willy, all these are, see, it is said that these are the modalities where we can just see and treat. Okay, I put in this via this acetic acid or lugolzidine. I see this. Okay, I conclude that okay, it is this. I may take the biopsy from this. And for it comes as CIN1. Accordingly, I treat. So the treatment is faster. The result is faster. Then the whole procedure is cheaper. And for a country like ours, where if we plan to do a mass screening for CA cervix, these are better. So if there is one very famous gynec oncologist, Dr. Bafna from oncology, from Kidwai. So he says this, that for a country like ours, if it is mass screening for carcinoma cervix, it has to be via NVLI, and all of us should be trained to do via NVLI. Okay. Yes. Next thing is cervical biopsy. Okay. So biopsy means what? Some tissue or the group of cells are taken. Okay, from that particular organ. Correct. Now, what we just discussed, the Pap smear, is also a type of biopsy, wherein it is a surface biopsy. Okay. In the transformation zone, if you see, that is a stratified squamous epithelium where there are many layers of cells, right? So there is a basal layer, parabasal layer, intermediate layer, then above that these superficial cells. So when we do a Pap smear, it is an upper layer. These superficial cells are what are taken in the Pap smear testing. Is it clear? So that is a surface biopsy. Now other biopsies are what? One is a punch biopsy. Another one is a wedge biopsy. And one more is cervical conization procedure. Okay, we'll discuss about it. Now, what is this punch biopsy? Now, see, the Pap test has come. Pap test has come positive, but I am not seeing any I'm not visualizing any abnormal cervix there. So what I do? I need to take a biopsy. Right? I need to confirm it. I can't, if the Pap has come CN1, I can't directly treat her. I have to reconfirm it, right? Unnecessarily treating a patient is not right. So what I do, I take a biopsy. Then what I do, I take biopsy from each quadrant of the cervix. The upper, the lower, the right, and the left. All the quadrants, I take punch biopsy. Okay? So this punch biopsy involves taking cervical tissue from all the 4 quadrants. So where were we? So one is the punch biopsy. Okay. Next thing is the wedge biopsy. See, I'm visualizing the cervix and I notice that there is a lesion. There is some growth there. So what I do, I take a tissue, I take biopsy from that area, wherein I leave the necrotic area and I take that lesion, the area where the lesion is, and also some healthy tissue, that wedge. Okay, that area I take specimen and then I send, that is wedge biopsy. Okay, next thing is cervical conization. Okay, cervical conization. This procedure is both therapeutic and diagnostic. Okay, and diagnostic, especially in cases where we have CIN1 and we need to CIN1 and 2 where she wants to conserve her uterus, but the disease has to be warded off. In such cases, what we can do, where the lesion is, that whole area, the transformation zone area, along with some part of the endocervical cavity, that much part is taken. It's almost like cone. Okay, so the transformation zone and also some bit extending into the endocervical cavity. So that much of the tissue is taken out. Okay, that is cervical conization procedure. So this has to be done under anesthesia. Okay, because you are, see, cervix is insensitive to touch, but sensitive to stretch. Okay, so when you're using certain instruments, holding it and stretching it, then it is sensitive. So you need to use local anesthetics and then do that procedure. But you know, when we do this extensive conization procedure, okay, what happens is there is high chance that in future she can have stenosis. During healing, it can get stenosed. Or later on during her pregnancy, there is high chance that there is cervical incompetence and mid-trimester abortions, all these things. And during cervical biopsy, most common complication is the bleeding. So if there is bleeding, what we need to do, we discuss. When cervical tear happens, what we do, the same thing. What we should do, we should pack and give good pressure to that area so that packing prevents the bleeding. Okay. Other than that, some hemostatic sutures or using copper sulfate or mouth sulfation. Clear? This is about cervical biopsy. And cervical biopsy is indicated when, see, all the institutes may not be equipped with colposcope, right? So in such a condition, you can directly, once the pap has come abnormal, you can directly go and do cervical biopsy. Or the pap is negative, but there is an evident lesion there, then I need to confirm it. That's why I do cervical biopsy in the absence of the colposcope. Okay. Next, two other testing modalities are, one is a HPV DNA testing. Now, what is done is it's quite costly. Now, in this current era, US and all, they do this testing, wherein each test may cost rupees 1,200 or so. So in our country, as such, we are not using HPV DNA testing as a screening modality. Especially, we test these 4 serotypes. One is 16, 18, 6, and 11. Okay, because they are the most common causative factors. Next thing is the OncoTect test, wherein we in the pathogenesis part, we got to know that during the virus and the host cell reaction, there is oncoprotein called E7, E6, E7 produced. So against this E6, E7, these E6, E7 are detected in the cells. So this is oncogenic proteins are tested. So that is OncoTect test. These are all the newer things which have come up. Okay, and they're quite costly. Okay, now how do we manage this precancerous condition? See, and if we manage it well, then we'll prevent that lady going into CSRX. Yes, and we have good treatment modalities for treating this precancerous lesions. Okay, now what are the management of precancerous lesion is mainly based on these conditions. What you're seeing, one is the age of the patient, desire to preserve the fertility, type of CIN, and follow-up. See, if she is younger age group who is not married, or she is still yet to have children, yet to complete the family, and thus wants to preserve the uterus, then we can't go in and do hysterectomy for such a patient, correct? So we need to preserve the uterus. Then next thing is the type of CIN. If it is a carcinoma in situ, for such a case, I can't go and do ablative therapies. I need to do a higher up, that is hysterectomy for such a case, right? So it depends on the type of CIN. Next thing is the follow-up. See, maybe for CIN1, all what is needed is a proper observation and follow-up with regular pap smears. For that, what is needed? Patient should be compliant. The patient has to come to us whenever we tell them. So, and also the facility for testing all these things has to be there. So based on all these requirements, we decide and determine the management modality. Previously, what was told is, once it comes a CIN, go do hysterectomy. But now, no. We look into it. Even if it comes a CIN1, we further, okay, we'll go in depth into each of the CIN. Then we'll know. Yeah. Okay. What are the treatment modalities? One is just an observation. Now, if you see, most of the HPV infections, we got to know 80% of the HPV infection regresses. And if you see CIN1 going into CA cervix, it is hardly less than 25% of the cases. Less than 25% of the cases go into CS cervix with respect to CIN1. Now, if you see CIN2 and 3, that is HSIL, here maybe 50 to 60% of the cases go into CS cervix. Okay, so having known this, what we do is we observe the case depending on her desire. It can be a very early age or desiring to preserve the uterus. So all such conditions, what we do, we observe the patient with regular follow-up, with regular screening. Okay, next treatment modality is the local ablative procedures. Okay, we have cryotherapy, we have laser therapy, we have electrodiathermy. So what is this? What do we do? Say the PAP and the colposcope and the biopsy have given the report as CIN1. So what we do? We under visualization, under local anesthesia, we go in for any of these three modalities. First, we'll discuss about cryotherapy. Okay, in cryotherapy, what we do is this nitrous oxide or the carbon dioxide, which is at a very low temperature of minus 22 degrees Celsius. Okay, at this low temperature, it is introduced through a knife. Okay, and placed at the places where there are these CIN lesions, which can be detected by a via or villi or anything. So such areas we place it. So we leave it for about 2 to 3 minutes. So what happens? This low temperature will cause cell death, and it heals by fibrosis. It heals by the squamous cells growing over it. Okay, this is the principle behind cryotherapy. Next thing is a laser therapy. Here, most commonly used is a carbon dioxide laser therapy, where the laser is applied to that particular lesion area, and here important thing is the depth also can be very well monitored. So I can fix it to a depth of 5 mm. So the laser goes to only that thickness. So it is much better than the cryotherapy, where cryotherapy is done manually. Yeah, there is no fixing to, it is not automated to, okay, this much depth or anything. Okay, whereas laser therapy, you can determine the depth of it. Okay, then is electrodiatherapy, wherein we use the low voltage electric current to char this, this area of lesion on the cervix. Okay, next thing is the excision. Loop electrosurgical excision procedure. One more is large loop electrosurgical excision of the transformation zone. So these are the excision methods. One more method is a cervical conization, which we discussed. That is also an excision method. Now in this LEEP or LETS, what is done is there is an electrosurgical instrument, okay, which has a stainless steel wire in front, which the length of it can vary from 2 to 3 centimeters. The dia of that wire can vary from 2 to 3 centimeters. Okay. Now, you, depending on where that area of CIN is and all, what we do, there we apply this LEEP, okay, and electrosurgically that area is excised. Okay. So LEEP is used for CIN1 and LETS is used for CIN2, where large area can be removed. And the last option is hysterectomy. Okay, when all we plan for hysterectomy? In cases of CIN, CIN3 and CIS, okay, definitely we do, without any doubt, we have to do hysterectomy. Okay, if she is pregnant or she is wanting to have family, then extend her family. Then what we have to do, even in cases of CIN2 or CIN3, CIS, we monitor, observe. Once it is done, we go for this procedure. Okay, so in cases of CIN3, CIS, there is no doubt we have to do hysterectomy. Okay, next thing is, if the patient has completed a family and she wishes that no, I can't live with this cancer. She has cancer phobia. Even if it is CIN1, we have to do. If she has completed her family, she is age old, and she insists for surgery, then we have to do. Next thing is she is not compliant. See, most important thing when we are doing this observational thing as a treatment modality, then most important thing is the patient has to come for regular follow-up. If she is a patient who is not compliant, then there is no point in sending her back. Okay, in such cases we do hysterectomy. And any time the smear or the biopsy says that there is squamous cell carcinoma or invasive carcinoma or even glandular carcinoma, then definitely we have to go into hysterectomy. Okay, now based on the cervical cytology report, how do we treat? Say you have done a pap smear and it comes as normal, nothing, CIN1 illa 2 enu illa, it is normal. Then what you have to do? Do a regular follow-up every 3 years once. Next thing is it comes as an inflammatory smear. Then what you do? You look for the cause for that inflammation, what organism it is, and accordingly treat with the antimicrobials. And what you do? You repeat the smear after 1.5 months, definitely. Now, next thing is a smear can come as unsatisfactory. That is, there are no adequate cells in the smear, or it is filled with blood cells where the pathologist is not able to visualize it. Then such a smear is called as unsatisfactory smear. Then what you have to do, you have to send for a repeat smear immediately. You don't have to wait. You take a smear once again and send it again. Next thing is, what if the report comes as CIN1? See, we need to be very cautious when we are taking the smear and when we are reporting the smear, because anything which comes as falsely positive, it is such an agony on the patient. Unnecessarily, she has to live with the fear that she has something like precancerous or which can get into cancerous lesion. So such a phobia she has to live with, or she may be unnecessarily exposed to unnecessary surgeries. So that's why we need to give a proper reporting of the smears. Okay, and also accordingly proper technique of taking the smear. If it comes as falsely negative because our technique was wrong, then again we are ill treating or under treating the under treating the patient, correct? So next thing is, what if the smear comes as CIN1? What will you do? So it is a pap positive, correct? So pap positive, I need to reconfirm. What I do, I subject her to colposcopy. If the colposcope is not there, then I do even the biopsy. Okay, then again, and based on these two studies, again it comes as CIN1. What I do, I can, if she is a patient who is compliant, is ready to come for follow-up, and she wants to preserve her uterus, what I do, I ask her to come for pap testing every 6 months. Okay, and if the consequent 2 pap tests have been negative, then what I can do, I can call her for regular follow-up. Likewise, how we were following up, we follow up the normal patients every 3 years once. The same way we call her up if the 2 pap tests have been negative. If any time the pap test, again during the follow-up study, again the pap test becomes positive, then I go in for these ablative procedures. What are they? One is the cryotherapy or the laser therapy, or even I can go for LEEP. Okay. Next thing, what will I do if the report comes as CIN2? See, CIN2, 10 to 15% of the cases can go into carcinoma in situ. Okay. So what I do, immediately I subject her to colposcopy and also take a biopsy from that area and get the reporting done. And it is confirmed that it is CIN2. Then what I do, I go in for ablative procedures, explaining the risk of, say, for example, if I go for cervical conization for her, I need to explain her that maybe in future you become pregnant, then mid-trimester abortions are very common, incompetence of cervix is very common. I need to explain all this risk to her and then choose these ablative procedures or excision procedures. And this large loop excision of transformation zone is most preferred for CIN2. Still, we can wait for hysterectomy. Okay. Now coming to CIN3 and carcinoma in situ, immediately we need to do a colposcopic guided biopsy. And if again she is young patient wanting to preserve her uterus, then we need to keep repeating the PAP. We need to keep repeating the PAP that it doesn't get into invasive carcinoma. Okay. Once everything is done, her all desires are fulfilled, then she can go in for hysterectomy. Okay. Next important thing is a prevention of CA cervix by using vaccines. Okay. There are two different types of vaccines which have come up. One is a bivalent vaccine, which is Cervarix, and a quadrivalent vaccine, which is Gardasil. Okay. This Cervarix is effective against HPV 16 and 18, whereas Gardasil is effective against 16, 18, 6 and 11, all the four which we discussed, causative factors for CSLX. Okay. Now, so this vaccine is ready. Now, when should we vaccine? When should we start the vaccination? See, anytime before exposure to coitus is when, before she becoming sexually active is when we need to start the pap smear. We need to give her the vaccine. It will be much effective. Okay. So the recommendation is that between 9 to 12 years, anytime you can start the vaccination. Okay. And you can give any time till the age of 45 years. Till she is 40, from 9 to 12 years, starting from 9 to 12 years, you can give till 45 years of age, the vaccination. And what is the dosage? It is given in 3 doses. One is a 0 dose. Second dose is given at the first month after the first dose. Then the third dose is given at 6th month, again in the deltoid region. Okay, IM, deltoid, 3 doses are given. This is about vaccination. Now, now if she has had vaccination, should she still get the pap test done? This is a question, correct? Yes, she has to still come for pap test. Because see, when I'm vaccinating her, it is only against those serotypes, those 4 serotypes. But there are other so many. We have 120 total serotypes of HPV, right? Any serotype can result in HPV and CA cervix. Though these, especially those 2, 16 and 18 being common, still any other serotype can infect. So that's why even though we are vaccinating, we need to regularly follow her up with pap test. Okay. Once she is detected to be HPV positive, then the vaccination is of no use. Okay. So this is all about the precancerous lesions of the cervix. So what we can do is, I would be very happy if some time is scheduled so that we can have a discussion on the CA cervix as well. So this is all. If you have any doubts or anything.
Madam, there are some doubts in the chat section. Can you please go through them, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay. How do we know what is the junction? 1 second. Just a second. Just a second. I'm just putting back the slide so that. So one person has asked, how will one know which is the junction? Okay. So I'll just show you on the slide. Is it, and one more question is it for every woman or high risk? So does it mean that
pap smear?
Okay. Yeah. For this question, every woman has to undergo pap smear testing, not just the high risk. Every woman has to undergo pap testing. Okay. Because see, it is, so every woman has to undergo pap testing. Why is pap not done if not had coitus? Yeah, because see, one is if you have to do a pap test, you need to visualize the cervix, right? So to visualize the cervix, you need to pass through the speculum. When the hymen is intact, you can't. You can't pass the speculum. Okay, so that's why you can't do it. Then, is it for every married woman? Yes. Ideally, pap, the screening has to be done. That's what the recommendation is. That every woman, once she has had the coitus, she has to undergo pap test every 3 years once. Is it for, okay, what if the patient is pregnant and has CIN1? So we just discussed, if it is CIN1 and she's pregnant, we can observe, be watchful, get pap test done 6 months. Again, say now she's UPT positive, tested positive, and she's 2 months, and also CIN1 comes positive. Then what you do? You need to observe her and monitor her and all that with regular practice. And once this part of it is done, that is delivery, all this is done, then we can decide upon the future management. And when there is pre-malignant conditions or CA cervix and there is pregnancy, there is high chance that she can bleed a lot, and there is high chance that cervical tear trauma can happen. Next what? If via Willi are better than why is PAP recommended everywhere as the principal test or gold standard? See again, via PAP smear is what you just have to take two. One is ectocervical smear and the endocervical smear. You need to take with those two instruments. Whereas via and Willi needs expertise. In making of that acetic acid, that particular concentration, applying it, and also reading it properly. Okay. Because these are inconclusive. And actually, if you see the sensitivity and specificity of PAP and via Willi, the specificity of PAP is 98%. Okay, and sensitivity is 58%. Whereas in for via and Willi, the sensitivity and specificity both, it is around 80 to 85%. So PAP test is much better. Woman who has undergone hysterectomy, can she menstruate? How come it is possible? I am amazed. No. How can a woman who has undergone hysterectomy menstruate? No, it is not. Is this question asked because of something was mentioned for PAP test post hysterectomy? Is that so? See, if she is, that's what I mentioned, that I didn't completely understand the question. If you can clarify it, it will be good. See, based on what I understood is the question, that if she is hysterectomized for any benign condition, say like a fibroid, then you need not do a PAP test after that. Whereas if she has undergone hysterectomy for CIN 1, 2, 3 or CIS or CA cervix or anything, still you need to take smear from the vaginal cuff, because there is high chance that the vagina can get infected. There can be carcinoma which can start in the vagina or spread into the vagina. That's why we need to test it, right? So you need to screen even the vaginal cuff. That's why we do it. See, if you see this as epithelium, okay, and this as a upper layer, superficial cells. Are you seeing me? Yes. So these are the superficial cells, and these are the basal cells, and here will be the stroma. So this is just the epithelium. There is a question which is asked. She says, basal cells in the stratified epithelium go superficial. Then CIN1 and 2, how superficial cells are normal. Yeah, the thing starts here. It starts from the basal layer, which are the reserve cells. Okay, So all these dysplasia, all this start at this layer. That is what is shown, and also the slides and all were shown. Okay, so it is first the basal layer which is affected. Okay, then what if the woman? So we'll discuss about CA cervix and questions on CA cervix in the next class. Who are high risk men? Those who are exposed to multiple sexual partners and who have high risk behavior are high risk men. I got to know about the junction. Thank you. Okay. See, CIN3 and and carcinoma in situ, both, that's why the management wise there is not much a difference. Both are grouped under HSIN. Okay, only difference is when you are doing a histopathological study in CIN3, it is more than 2/3 of the thickness of the epithelium is involved, whereas in carcinoma in situ the whole thickness of the epithelium is involved. That's the only difference. Yes, the vaccine can be given to sexually active women. It can be given till 45 years of age. See, it is said that with the advent of vaccination, if it becomes more feasible, okay, the cost of it and all is more feasible, then it is much better to get vaccinated than get pap smear done. So in the years to come, maybe the vaccination is going to take over the screening method once it becomes more feasible, cost wise and everything. Pap smear. Yeah, see, pap smear and HPV DNA testing is done in India, but doing it as a mass screening or using it as a screening methodology for all people is quite costly. It is not cheap like pap smear. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Yeah. So there is ACOG, which says the guidelines for vaccination that it can be started in the pre-puberty age group itself, that is from 9 to 12 years. You can start vaccination from that age, at that age group itself. Components of complaints of patients with pre-malignant lesion, many many may not come with any symptoms. They may be asymptomatic. Usually what we see is like that. The CIN1, 2 and all, they are asymptomatic. Or very rarely they may come with bleeds on touch, or that what we noticed, no, that cervical erosion, abnormal looking cervix when I put a speculum. So based on clinical examination, many may get detected. That's why many of these precancerous lesions are asymptomatic. That's why screening is very much needed. Okay, there is a question, few questions on how do we grade different pre-malignant conditions on depth if it is exfoliative cytology. I will go through a bit more because even I have a lot of doubts on this. So I'll speak to a pathologist again and come back in the next class. Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am.